Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of his ship and watched the stars burn. The view screen showed him something no human should ever have to see. Entire worlds were dying out there in the black of space. Ships the size of cities traded fire that could melt mountains. Energy beams crossed the void like deadly lightning, and wherever they touched, planets cracked open like eggs. The war had been going on for over 300 years. Jake had read all the reports, studied all the data, but seeing it with his own eyes was different. The two sides fought with weapons that could boil oceans and crack continents. They had been killing each other for so long that most of their people had never known peace. His ship, the Eds Vigilant, hung in space near a world called Kepler 442b. The planet below was beautiful, covered in blue oceans and green continents. It looked almost like Earth, but it was about to become another battlefield in a war that seemed to have no end. Jake was 42 years old and had spent half his life in space. He had short brown hair that was starting to show gray at the sides. His uniform bore the insignia of the Earth Defense Corps, but today he felt more like a funeral director than a soldier. His job was to try to make peace between two alien races that had been trying to kill each other since before humans learned to fly. The Zephyrian Empire controlled one side of the galaxy. They were beings made of living crystal who valued individual thought above all else. Their ships looked like floating cathedrals of diamond and light. When they moved, they sparkled like stars. When they fought, they fired beams of pure energy that could cut through anything. On the other side were the Vorthans. They were insect-like creatures that shared one mind across billions of bodies. Their ships were grown rather than built, looking like massive, living things that pulsed with bioelectric energy. They could regenerate from almost any damage, and their weapons were viruses that ate through metal and flesh alike. Both sides had enough firepower to destroy every planet in the galaxy twice over. Both sides had used it before. Jake had seen the reports from the dead systems, worlds that were nothing but floating rocks and radioactive dust because two alien races could not find a way to stop fighting. Humanity had only joined the Galactic community 50 years ago. Earth was still new to space travel when the first alien ships arrived over major cities. The contact had been peaceful, even friendly. Other races were curious about humans and welcomed them into the Galactic Council, but with that welcome came responsibilities. The Council needed mediators, species that could talk to both sides of conflicts and help find solutions. Humans were good at talking. They were also good at understanding different points of view. So when the Zephyrian-Vorthan War threatened to spread to neutral worlds, the Council asked Earth to help. 12 other species had tried to mediate this conflict over the years. All of them had failed. The Corvani tried logical arguments for 50 years. The Zephyrians and Vorthans ignored them. The Milari offered economic incentives. Both sides took the money and kept fighting. The Dekai used religious arguments about the sanctity of life. Both sides claimed their gods demanded victory. Now it was humanity's turn, and Jake was running out of time. 3 days ago, the Galactic Council had delivered an ultimatum. If the humans could not broker peace within 72 hours, both the Zephyrians and Vorthans would be declared enemies of all civilized species. Their trade would be cut off. Their colonies would be isolated. Their wars would be contained by force if necessary, but there was another consequence that worried Jake more. If humanity failed, Earth's colonies would be at risk. The young human. Settlements on a dozen worlds depended on galactic trade and protection. If the Council lost faith in human diplomatic abilities, those colonies could be abandoned to whatever fate awaited them. Jake turned away from the view screen and looked at his bridge crew. They were good people, all volunteers who had left Earth to serve in space. Lieutenant Rodriguez worked at the communications station. Her dark hair pulled back in a tight ponytail as she monitored transmissions from both fleets. Sergeant Murphy handled tactical displays, his thick fingers dancing over controls that could target either enemy fleet if diplomacy failed. Dr. Blake stood near the science station, her medical knowledge helping the crew understand alien biology and psychology. The latest reports were not encouraging. The Zephyrians demanded that the Vorthans surrender completely and pay tribute in the form of rare minerals from their conquered worlds. The Vorthans insisted that they needed to expand their territory and absorb 3 Zephyrian systems to ensure their survival. Neither side would consider compromise. Jake had read every peace treaty in human history, studied every successful negotiation. He understood that most conflicts came down to fear and misunderstanding. People fought because they were afraid of losing something important or because they did not understand what their enemies really wanted. But this war seemed different. Both sides had clear demands that directly opposed each other. The Zephyrians would rather die than lose their individual minds to the Vorthan collective. The Vorthans believed that individual consciousness was a form of death, a waste of knowledge and experience that should be preserved in their shared memory. Jake walked to his command chair and sat down. The leather creaked under his weight as he considered his options. In less than 60 hours, he would have to report his success or failure to Admiral Torres. Back on Earth, the Admiral was a tough woman who had fought in the border wars against the Centauri pirates. She understood military tactics and political pressure, but she also trusted Jake to find solutions that others had missed. The problem was that Jake was not sure any solution existed. How do you make peace between 2 species that define existence itself in opposite ways? How do you negotiate between people who see your enemy's very existence as a threat to their souls? Outside the view screen, another energy exchange lit up. The darkness. Somewhere out there, people were dying for ideas that neither side seemed willing to question. Jake closed his eyes and tried to think of something that 12 other species had not already attempted. The clock was ticking and the galaxy was burning while he sat in his chair and wondered if humans were really any better at peace than they were at war. Jake made a decision that would have gotten him court-martialed on Earth. He was going to meet with both enemy leaders face-to-face, alone, without backup or weapons. Lieutenant Rodriguez looked at him like he had lost his mind when he explained. His plan? Sir, no human has ever been alone with either species, she said, her voice tight with worry. We don't know how they'll react. What if they take you prisoner? What if they decide to use you as a hostage? Jake understood her concerns, but he also knew that every previous mediator had tried to negotiate from a distance. They sent messages back and forth, held conferences on neutral stations, spoke through translators and diplomatic protocols. Nobody had ever just sat down with these people and tried to understand what they were really fighting about. Sometimes you have to take risks to get answers, Jake told his crew. I need to know what they're actually afraid of, not what their official statements say they want. He took a small shuttle, barely large enough for one person, and flew it into the space between the 2 fleets. This was called the neutral zone, a stretch of empty space where both sides maintained an uneasy ceasefire. Ships from either fleet could destroy his tiny shuttle with a single shot, but the diplomatic protocol should protect him. The Zephyrian dreadnought Crystal Spear was the most beautiful thing Jake had ever seen. It looked like someone had carved a cathedral out of a single massive diamond. Light moved through its crystal walls in patterns that hurt his eyes to follow. When his shuttle docked, the airlock sealed with a sound like wind chimes. War Prime Kethver met him in a chamber that sparkled with rainbow light. The Zephyrian leader was 12 feet tall and looked like he was made of living gemstone. When he moved, colors danced across his surface. When he spoke, his voice rang like struck crystal and his thoughts appeared as lights that swirled around his head. Human Jake Morrison, Kethver said, you risk much by coming here alone. My people could end your existence with a thought. Jake kept his voice steady. I'm here because I want to understand why you fight. Not what you fight for, but why you can't stop. The lights around Kethver's head pulsed faster. You ask the wrong question, small human. We do not fight because we want to. We fight because we must. The Vorthans would steal our minds, our very selves. They would make us part of their collective, erase everything that makes us who we are. Better to die as individuals than live as pieces of their hive. Jake listened as Kethver explained Zephyrian culture. Each crystal being was unique, with thoughts and memories that belonged to no one else. They valued creativity, innovation, and personal growth. The idea of sharing their minds with others, of becoming part of a collective consciousness, was worse than death to them. "But do you know what the Vorthons actually want?" Jake asked. "Have you ever asked them directly?" The lights around Kethver dimmed. "We know what they want. They have said it clearly. They wish to absorb us, to make us part of their collective memory. This we cannot allow." Jake thanked the War Prime and returned to his shuttle. The trip to the Vorthon bioship took 2 hours. The living mountain looked like a massive creature floating in space, with organic curves and pulsing bioluminescent patches. When his shuttle docked, it felt like being swallowed by a whale. The inside of the ship was warm and humid, with walls that seemed to breathe. Queen Voice Rumthick met him in a chamber that felt more like being inside a living creature than aboard a spacecraft. The Vorthon was 8 feet tall with 6 arms and compound eyes that reflected light like mirrors. When she spoke, Jake felt her words inside his head as much as heard them with his ears. "Human mediator," Rumthick said, "you come to us seeking understanding. We appreciate this, though we fear you will not comprehend what we tell you." Jake fought against the mental contact. Having someone else's thoughts in his head was disturbing, but he forced himself to stay calm. "Tell me why you fight. Help me understand what you need." Rumthick's mental voice was like a whisper from 1,000 people at once. "We do not fight to destroy human, we fight to preserve. The Zephyrians choose to let their knowledge die with their bodies. They learn things, experience beauty, create art, and then they die, and all of that is lost forever. We offer them immortality, a chance to live forever in our collective memory, but they refuse." Jake felt the alien's genuine sadness. The Vorthons did not see absorption into their collective as destruction. They saw it as rescue. Every individual consciousness that joined them became part of an eternal library of experience and knowledge. Death, to them, was the ultimate waste. "The Zephyrians fear losing their individuality," Jake said. "They think you want to erase who they are? We do not erase," Rumthick replied. "We preserve. Every voice that joins us remains distinct within the collective. They would still be themselves, but they would also be part of something greater. They choose isolation and death over connection and eternal life. This we cannot understand." Jake spent another hour learning about Vorthon culture. They were not conquerors in the way humans understood the term. They were more like librarians who wanted to save every book before the library burned down. The problem was that the Zephyrians saw their library as a prison on his way back to the Vigilant. Jake's shuttle suffered a critical system failure. The engine died, life support began to fail, and his communications went dark. He was alone in space, between 2 hostile fleets with no way to call for help. That was when he noticed something remarkable. Both fleets began moving toward his position. Zephyrian crystal ships and Vorthon biovessels changed course and headed straight for his disabled shuttle. For a moment, Jake thought they were going to fight over who got to capture or kill him instead. They formed a protective formation around his tiny ship. The Zephyrians projected energy shields to protect him from radiation. The Vorthons extended biomechanical tendrils to stabilize his shuttle's tumbling motion. Neither fleet fired on the other, despite being well within weapons range. Jake managed to get his emergency systems working long enough to send a distress signal. Both fleets immediately responded, offering assistance. The Zephyrians wanted to beam him aboard their ship. The Vorthons offered to extend the biotube so he could transfer safely. Neither side tried to prevent the other from helping. He declined both offers and managed to restart his shuttle's engines. As he flew back toward the Vigilant, both fleets maintained their protective positions until he was safely away. Only then did they return to their original positions and resume their standoff. Back on his own ship, Jake sat in his quarters and tried to process what he had learned. Both species were afraid of the same thing, losing what made them who they were. The Zephyrians feared absorption and the loss of individuality. The Vorthons feared death and the loss of accumulated knowledge and experience. But more important than their fears was what he had observed during his mechanical failure. Both fleets had immediately moved to protect him, working together without communication or coordination. They had set aside their war to save one human life. That told Jake something important about both species. Despite 300 years of conflict, they were not monsters. They did not enjoy killing. They were not driven by hatred or bloodlust. They were afraid and they were fighting because they saw no other choice. Jake began to form an idea, something crazy and dangerous that might just work. He would need his crew's help, and he would need to be very careful about timing. But for the first time since arriving in this system, he thought he might have found a way to end the war. The question was whether he could do it. Before his 72 hours ran out, Jake called his senior staff to the briefing room and told them about his plan. The silence that followed was so complete he could hear the ship's life support systems humming in the walls. Lieutenant Colonel Amy Brooks was the first to speak. "You want to do what?" she asked, her tactical training making her voice sharp with disbelief. Jake looked around the table at his team. Amy Brooks handled all combat operations and strategic planning. She was a small woman with red hair and green eyes that missed nothing. Dr. Paul Grant served as their xenopsychologist, helping them understand alien behavior and motivations. He was older than the others, with gray hair and wire-rimmed glasses that made him look like a professor. Chief Engineer Sam Rivers kept their ship running and handled all technical operations. He was built like a wrestler but had the delicate hands of someone who worked with precision instruments. "I want to threaten both fleets," Jake said again. "I want to make them think that humanity is going to attack them both." Amy shook her head. "Sir, that's not mediation. That's provocation. You'll start a three-way war instead of ending a two-way one." Dr. Grant leaned forward in his chair. "Jake, I understand what you observed out there, but threatening both sides could backfire completely. What if they decide to destroy us first and then resume fighting each other?" Sam Rivers was more direct. "Boss, with respect, that's the stupidest plan I've ever heard. Our ship has enough firepower to maybe scratch the paint on one of their dreadnoughts. How exactly are we going to threaten fleets that could vaporize solar systems?" Jake had expected this reaction. His plan sounded insane because it was insane. But sometimes insane was exactly what a situation needed. "Think about what happened when my shuttle broke down," he said. "Both fleets moved to protect me. They worked together for the first time in 3 centuries, and they did it without any communication or negotiation. They just did it." Amy pulled up tactical displays on the briefing room screen. "That was one small shuttle, sir. You're talking about threatening entire fleets with planetary bombardment capability." "Exactly," Jake said. "I'm going to make them think we're about to destroy something they both want to protect." Dr. Grant adjusted his glasses and studied the display. "The planet. You wanted to threaten the planet they're both fighting over." Jake nodded. "Kepler 442b is the prize in this particular battle. Both sides want it. The Zephyrians think it has rare crystal formations in the core. The Vorthans believe it has bioorganisms they can incorporate into their collective. Neither side wants to see it destroyed." Sam Rivers ran calculations on his portable computer. "Even if we could threaten the planet, which we can't, what makes you think they wouldn't just blow us up and then continue their fight?" Jake stood up and walked to the display screen. He pointed to the sensor readings from both fleets. "Look at their formations. They're not positioned for attack. They're positioned for defense. Both fleets are protecting the planet, not trying to capture it." Amy studied the tactical data more carefully. "You're right. They're maintaining defensive perimeters around the planet, but they're not actually fighting for control of it." "Because they can't fight for it without risking its destruction," Jake said. "Both sides have been locked in this standoff for months, because neither one wants to be responsible for damaging what they're trying to claim." Dr. Grant began to understand. "You think they're more interested in preserving the planet than in defeating each other?" "I think they're tired of fighting," Jake said. "I think they want to stop, but don't know how to do it without losing face. What they need is a reason to work together instead of against each other. Sam Rivers looked skeptical. And you think pretending to threaten the planet will give them that reason? Jake sat back down. Not pretending. I'm going to make them believe we have a weapon capable of destroying the planet. I'm going to give them exactly 60 seconds to decide whether to work together to stop us or watch everything they've been fighting for turn into radioactive dust. Amy Brooks ran threat assessments on her computer. Sir, even if this works? Even if they do work together to stop us? What then? Once they realize we can't actually hurt the planet, they'll go back to fighting each other. No, they won't, Jake said. Because I'm not just going to threaten the planet. I'm going to show them something that will change how they think about this entire war. Jake spent the next hour explaining the details of his plan to his staff. Sam Rivers would use the ship's deflector array to create a light show that would mimic the energy signature of a planet-killing weapon. The display would be harmless but spectacular, designed to look like the Vigilant was charging up for a devastating attack. Amy Brooks would monitor both fleets and track their responses. If Jake was right, both sides would immediately begin coordinating their defenses. They would share targeting data, tactical information, and strategic plans for the first time in centuries. Dr. Grant would analyze the psychological impact of the demonstration. His job was to watch for signs that both species were beginning to see each other as allies rather than enemies. The most dangerous part of the plan was the timing. Jake would have exactly 4 minutes to make his point before both fleets realized they were being manipulated. If he took too long, they would have time to analyze the energy patterns and discover that the Vigilance weapon display was fake. If he moved too quickly, they would not have time to coordinate their response. There's one more thing, Jake said as the briefing ended. About 3 minutes into the demonstration, I'm going to change the energy signature of our fake weapon. I'm going to make it match something from the historical records, something both species will recognize. Sam Rivers looked confused. Match what, exactly? Jake pulled up a classified file from the Galactic archives. 350 years ago, both the Zephyrians and the Vorthons were attacked by the same enemy. Ships that came from outside the galaxy, machines that fed on the life energy of entire worlds. Both species fought against this enemy and eventually drove them back into deep space. Amy Brooks read over the file, the Devourers. But sir, these are classified military records. How did you get access to them? I requisitioned them as part of my mediation research, Jake said. What's interesting is that the weapon signatures from those ancient machines are still in both species' military databases. They're programmed to recognize and respond to this specific type of energy pattern. Dr. Grant began to understand the psychological implications. You're going to make them think the Devourers have returned. You're going to give them a common enemy. I'm going to remind them that they used to be allies, Jake said. Before this war started, before they began fighting each other, the Zephyrians and Vorthons fought side by side against a threat that wanted to destroy them both. Sam Rivers was already running calculations for the energy display. This could work, boss. The deflector array can definitely reproduce those energy patterns. But if both fleets recognize the signature, they might panic. They might try to evacuate the system instead of working together. That's a risk we have to take, Jake said. But I don't think they'll run. Both species are warriors. When they see a threat to something they value, their first instinct is to fight, not flee. Amy Brooks saved the tactical data to her personal files. Sir, if this plan fails, it won't just end your career. It could mean war between humanity and both alien species. The Galactic Council will disown us, and Earth will be on its own. Jake nodded. He understood the stakes. If his 4-minute demonstration failed to make peace, it would probably start the largest war in galactic history. But if it succeeded, it would end a conflict that had been killing people for longer than human civilization had existed. Sometimes you have to risk everything to save everything, he said. In 18 hours, I'm going to find out if humans really are any good at making peace. Jake stood on the bridge of the Vigilant and prepared to either end a war or start a much bigger one. His hands were steady as he activated the communication system, but his heart was beating fast enough that he could feel it in his throat. In 4 minutes, he would know whether his plan was brilliant or suicidal. "This is Commander Jake Morrison of the Earth Defense Corps' ship Vigilant," he broadcast on all frequencies to both fleets. "I am officially informing both the Zephyrian Empire and the Vorthan Collective that humanity withdraws from all mediation efforts in this system." The response from both fleets was immediate. Communication requests flooded in from dozens of ships. War Prime Kethver-S crystal voice demanded an explanation. Queen Voice Rumthik-S mental touch pressed against Jake's mind, seeking answers. He ignored them all. "Furthermore," Jake continued, "under Section 12 of the Galactic Settlement Charter, humanity hereby claims this entire system for human colonization. All non-human vessels have 30 seconds to withdraw beyond the system boundary or be destroyed." The bridge fell silent except for the hum of the ship's systems. Lieutenant Rodriguez monitored communications traffic between the two fleets. Her face was pale as she listened to the increasingly frantic exchanges between Zephyrian and Vorthan commanders. "Sir," she said, "both fleets are demanding immediate clarification. They want to know what legal authority we're claiming and what weapons we possess to enforce this demand." Jake cut off all incoming communications and looked at Sam Rivers. "Chief, initiate the light show, full power to the deflector array." Sam's hands moved over his controls with practiced precision. "Deflector array charging, sir. Energy patterns locked in. This is going to look very impressive from the outside." The Vigilance deflector array began to glow with brilliant white light. Energy patterns danced across the ship's hull, creating spectacular displays that could be seen from millions of miles away. To anyone watching from the alien fleets, it would look like the human ship was charging a weapon of incredible power. "Amy," Brooks tracked the response from both enemy fleets. "Sir, both sides are moving into defensive positions around the planet. Zephyrian crystal ships are extending their energy shields. Vorthan bio-vessels are positioning themselves to intercept incoming fire." "They're not attacking each other?" Jake asked. "No, sir. They're coordinating their movements. I'm detecting data streams between the fleets. They're sharing tactical information." Jake watched the tactical display as the two enemy fleets, for the first time in 3 centuries, began working together. Zephyrian shield generators linked up with Vorthan bioscreens to create a defensive barrier around the planet they had been fighting over just minutes earlier. 60 seconds into the demonstration, Jake opened communications with both fleets. "Again, this is your final warning. Our planetary bombardment systems are fully charged. You have 3 minutes to evacuate this system." War Prime Kethver-S response came through the Crystal Communication Network. "Human Jake Morrison, explain your actions. You cannot possess weapons of this magnitude. Your species is too young, too primitive." Queen Voice Rumthik-S mental voice was more direct. "Human mediator, we sense deception in your actions. What is your true purpose?" Jake ignored their questions and nodded. To Sam Rivers. "Chief, increase power to maximum. Make it look like we're preparing for immediate bombardment." The light show around the Vigilant intensified. Energy patterns that mimicked the signatures of planet-killing weapons danced across the ship's hull. Both alien fleets responded by tightening their defensive formations and increasing their shield strength. Amy Brooks monitored the fleet movements with growing amazement. "Sir, they're not just defending together. They're optimizing their defensive positions. Zephyrians are covering the gaps in the Vorthan formations, and the Vorthans are reinforcing the weak points in the Zephyrian shields. They know how to work together," Jake said. "They just needed a reason to remember how." 2 minutes into the demonstration, something unexpected happened. Both fleets began moving toward the Vigilant. Not to attack, but to position themselves between the human ship and the planet they were protecting. Dr. Grant watched the alien psychology displays on his screen. "Jake, look at this. Both species are exhibiting protective behavior patterns. They're not just defending the planet. They're defending it from us specifically. Good, Jake said. That means they see us as a credible threat. Sam Rivers called out from his engineering station. Boss, I'm picking up some strange energy readings from long-range sensors. Something big is moving toward this system from deep space. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. How big? Multiple contacts, sir. Maybe 100 ships, moving fast. They'll reach the system boundary in about 6 hours. Amy Brooks cross-referenced the sensor data with her military databases. Sir, these energy signatures don't match any known species. The propulsion systems are completely unfamiliar. Jake realized that his plan was about to become much more complicated. He had intended to fake the return of an ancient enemy to unite the two warring fleets. Instead, it looked like the real enemy was actually returning. Chief Rivers, modify the energy display, Jake ordered. Switch to the historical pattern we discussed. Make it match the Devourer weapon signatures from 350 years ago. Sam's fingers flew over his controls. The light show around the Vigilant changed, taking on the distinctive energy patterns that both alien species would recognize. From their ancestral memories, the response from both fleets was immediate and dramatic. Every ship in both armadas suddenly focused their attention on the Vigilant. But instead of preparing to attack, they began transmitting historical data files and tactical analyses. War Prime. Kethver's voice carried a note of fear that Jake had never heard before. Human vessel, you display the energy patterns of the ancient enemy. How do you possess the weapons of the Devourers? Queen Voice Rumthic's mental touch was filled with ancestral terror. The machines that consume worlds have returned. All life in this system is in danger. Jake opened communications to both fleets simultaneously. This is Commander Morrison. The energy display you're seeing is completely harmless. It's a light show created by our deflector array to get your attention. But I need you to listen carefully. Because what I'm about to tell you could save both your species. He paused, letting his words sink in before continuing. Long-range sensors are detecting approximately 100 unknown ships approaching the system. Their energy signatures match the historical records of the machines you call the Devourers. The ancient enemy that both your species fought 350 years ago has returned. Amy Brooks confirmed the sensor readings. Sir, the unknown contacts are definitely using propulsion and energy systems that match the historical Devourer. Signatures? This isn't a coincidence. Dr. Grant analyzed the psychological responses from both alien fleets. Jake, both species are exhibiting classic fear responses, but they're also showing signs of determination and unity. They're remembering what it was like to fight together against a common enemy. Jake looked at the tactical display as both alien fleets began reorganizing their formations. Instead of facing each other across a neutral zone, they were positioning themselves to defend the system from external threats. Commander Morrison, War Prime Kethver transmitted. If the Devourers have truly returned, then our ancient war must be set aside. The survival of all conscious life depends on unity against the machine threat. Queen Voice Rumthic's mental voice carried agreement and resolve. The collective memory of our people recalls the terror of the ancient war. Individual consciousness and collective consciousness must stand together or both will be consumed. Jake smiled as he watched two enemy fleets transform into allied armadas. His 4-minute demonstration had accomplished what 3 centuries of diplomacy could not. The Zephyrians and Vorthans were working together again, but now they faced a real threat, not a simulated one. The ancient enemy was returning, and Jake had just volunteered humanity to help fight a war that had nearly destroyed the galaxy once. All right, people, he said to his bridge crew. It looks like we're about to find out what humans can do when the stakes are higher than just one war. The Devourer fleet emerged from hyperspace like a plague of metal locusts. Jake watched on his view screen as 100 machine ships materialized at the edge of the star system. Each vessel was a twisted amalgamation of stolen technology, cobbled together from the remains of civilizations they had consumed over the millennia. The machines had been watching and waiting for over 3 centuries, using the war between the Zephyrians and Vorthons to keep both species distracted and weakened. While the two alien races exhausted themselves in endless conflict, the Devourers had been growing stronger, absorbing other civilizations in distant parts of the galaxy. War Prime, Kethver, and Queen Voice Frumthick requested immediate transport. To the Vigilant. Jake agreed, and within an hour both alien leaders stood in his briefing room. Seeing them together was remarkable. The crystalline Zephyrian sparkled with nervous energy while the insectoid Vorthon remained perfectly still, her compound eyes reflecting the room's lights like mirrors. "Commander Morrison," Kethver said, his crystal voice ringing with determination, "we owe you an apology. Our peoples have been fighting the wrong war for 300 years. The real enemy was never each other." Frumthick's mental voice added, "The collective memory now recalls what individual consciousness had forgotten. The Devourers seeded our conflict, used our philosophical differences to turn us against each other while they prepared to consume us both." Jake studied the tactical displays that showed both fleets repositioning for battle. "Your technologies complement each other perfectly. The Zephyrians provide shields and energy weapons. The Vorthons provide mobility and regenerative capabilities. It's almost like you were designed to fight together." "We were," Kethver admitted. "During the first war against the Devourers, our ancestors developed technologies that worked in harmony. Zephyrian crystal matrices could store and amplify Vorthon bioelectric energy. Vorthon living ships could repair and maintain Zephyrian crystal arrays." Dr. Grant looked up from his analysis of the historical records. "The Devourers deliberately manipulated both species after the First War ended. They planted ideas and fears that turned natural differences into irreconcilable conflicts." Amy Brooks monitored the approaching enemy fleet. "Sir, the Devourer ships are massive. Some of them are the size of small moons. Our combined fleet is outnumbered and outgunned, but not outsmarted," Jake said. He turned to both alien leaders. "The Devourers have one critical weakness. Their machines.